Lives of the Most Eminent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects by Giorgio Vasari.
Life of Nicola and Giovanni of Pisa. Nicola Pisano and Giovanni Pisano, Sculptors and Architects. Having discoursed of design and of painting in the life of Cimabue, and of architecture in that of Arnolfo di Lapo, in this one concerning Nicola and Giovanni of Pisa, we will treat of sculpture, and also of the most important buildings that they made, for the reason that their works in sculpture and in architecture truly deserve to be celebrated, not only as being large and magnificent, but also well enough conceived, since both in working marble and in building they swept away in great part that old Greek manner, rude and void of proportion, showing better invention in their stories, and giving better attitudes to their figures. Niccola Pisano, then, chancing to be under certain Greek sculptors, who were working the figures and other carved ornaments of the Duomo of Pisa, and of the Church of San Giovanni, and there being, among many marble spoils brought by the fleet of the Pisans, certain ancient sarcophagi that are to-day in the Campo Santo of that city, there was one of them, most beautiful among them all, whereon there was carved the chase of Meleager, after the Calydon boar, in very beautiful manner, seeing that both the nude figures and the draped were wrought with much mastery, and with most perfect design. This sarcophagus was placed by the Pisans, by reason of its beauty, in the side of the Duomo opposite San Rocco, beside the principal side door, and it served for the body of the mother of Countess Matilda, if indeed these words are true that are to be read carved in the marble. A.D. 1116. 9 Cal. August. Obit. Died Matilda felicis memore comitissa, que pro anima genetrix su domin Beatrixis comitisse venerabilis, in hac tumba honorabili quintis, in multis partibus mirafis hanc dotavat ecclesiam, quorum anime requisant in pace. And then, A.D. 1303, sub dognissimo apparario di Burgundio Tadi, occasion redum fiendorum per ipsum circa ecclesiam supradicta tumor superius, notata bis translata fuit, tunc de sedibus primus in ecclesiam, nunc de ecclesia in hunc locum ut sentnicis excellentum. Nicola, pondering over the beauty of this work, and being greatly pleased therewith, put so much study and diligence into imitating this manner, and some other good sculptures that were in these other ancient sarcophagi, that he was judged, after no long time, the best sculptor of his day, there being in Tuscany in those times, after Arnolfo, no other sculptor of repute, save Fuccio, an architect and sculptor in Florence, who made Santa Maria sopra Arno in Florence, in the year 1229, placing his name there over a door, and in the church of San Francesco in Assisi he made the marble tomb of the Queen of Cyprus, with many figures, and in particular a portrait of her sitting on a lion, in order to show the strength of her soul, which queen, after her death, left a great sum of money to the end that this fabric might be finished. Nicola, then, having made himself known as a much better master than Fuccio, was summoned to Bologna, in the year 1225, after the death of San Domenico Calagorro, first founder of the order of preaching friars, in order to make a marble tomb for the said saint. Wherefore, after agreement with those who had the charge of it, he made it full of figures, in that manner wherein it is to be seen to-day, and delivered it finished in the year 1231, with much credit to himself, for it was held something remarkable, and the best of all the work that had been wrought in sculpture up to that time. He made likewise the model of the church and of a great part of the convent. Afterwards Niccola, returning to Tuscany, found that Fuccio had departed from Florence and had gone to Rome, in those days when the Emperor Frederick was crowned by Honorius, and from Rome with Frederick to Naples, where he finished the Castel di Capuana, today called the Vaccaria, wherein are all the tribunals of that kingdom, and likewise the Castel dell'Uovo, and where he likewise founded the towers. He also made the gates over the river Volturno for the city of Capua, and a park girt with walls for fowling near Gravina, and another for sport in winter at Melfi, besides many other things that are not revealed for the sake of brevity. Niccola, meanwhile, busying himself in Florence, was going on exercising himself, not only in sculpture, but in architecture as well, by means of the buildings that were going on being made with some little goodness of design throughout all Italy, and in particular in Tuscany. Wherefore he occupied himself not a little with the building of the Abbey of Settimo, which had not been finished by the executors of Count Ugo of Brandenburg, like the other 6, as was said above. And although it is read in a marble epitaph on the campanile of the said abbey, Gelium me facit, it is known nevertheless by the manner that it was directed with the counsel of Niccola. About the same time he made the Palazzo Vecchio of the Anziani in Pisa, pulled down in our day by Duke Cosimo, in order to make the magnificent palace of the convent of the Knights of St. Stephen on the same spot, using some part of the old, from the design and model of Giorgio Vasari, painter and architect of Arezzo, who has accommodated himself to those old walls as well as he has been able in fitting them into the new. Niccola made likewise in Pisa many other palaces and churches, and he was the first, since the loss of the good method of building, who made it the custom to found edifices in Pisa on piers, and on these to raise arches, piles having first been sunk under the said piers, because with any other method these solid base of the foundation cracked and the walls always collapsed, whereas the sinking of piles rendered the edifice absolutely safe, even as experience shows. With his design also was made the church of San Michele in Borgo, for the monks of Camaldoli. But the most beautiful, the most ingenious, and the most whimsical work of architecture that Niccola ever made was the Campanile of St. Nicola of Pisa, where is the seat of the friars of St. Augustine, for the reason that it is octagonal on the outer side and round within, with stairs that wind in a spiral and lead to the summit, leaving a hollow space in the middle free, in the shape of a well, and on every 4th step are columns that have arches above them on slant and wind around and round, wherefore the spring of the vaulting rests on the said arches. One goes climbing to the summit in a manner that he who is on the ground always sees all those who are climbing. Those who are climbing see those who are on the ground, and those who are halfway up see both the first and the second, that is, those who are above and those who are below. This fanciful invention, with better method and more just proportions, and with more adornment, was afterwards put into execution by the architect Bramante in the Belvedere in Rome, for Pope Julius II, and by Antonio de San Gallo in the well that is at Orvieto, by order of Pope Clement VII, as will be told when the time comes. But returning to Niccola, who was no less excellent as sculptor than as architect, in the façade of the church of St. Martino in Lucia, under the portico that is above the lesser door, on the left as one enters into the church, where there is seen a Christ deposed from the cross, he made a marble scene in half relief, all full of figures wrought with much diligence, having hollowed out the marble and finished the whole in a manner that gave hope to those who were previously working at the art with very great difficulty, that there soon should come one who, with more facility, would give them better assistance. The same Niccola, in the year 1240, gave the design for the church of St. Jacopo in Pistoia, and put to work there in mosaic certain Tuscan masters who made the vaulting of the choir niche, which, although in those times it was held as something difficult and of great cost, moves us today rather to laughter and to compassion than to marvel, and all the more because such confusion, which comes from lack of design, existed not only in Tuscany, but throughout all Italy, where many buildings and other works that were being wrought without method and without design give us to know no less the poverty of their talents than the unmeasured riches wasted by the men of those times, by reason of their having no masters, who might execute in a good manner any work that they might do. Niccola, then, by means of the works that he was making in sculpture and in architecture, was going on ever acquiring a greater name than the sculptors and architects who were then working in Romagna, as can be seen in St. Ippolito and St. Giovanni of Faenza, in the Duomo of Ravenna, in St. Francesco, in the houses of the Traversari, and in the church of Porto, and at Rimini, in the fabric of the public buildings, in the houses of the Malatesti, and in other buildings, which are all much worse than the old edifices made about the same time in Tuscany. And what has been said of Romagna can also be said with truth of a part of Lombardy. A glance at the Duomo of Ferrara, and at the other buildings made by the Marquis Azzo, will give us to know that this is the truth, and how different they are from the Santo of Padua, made with the model of Niccola, and from the Church of the Friars Minor in Venice, both magnificent and honoured buildings. Many, in the time of Niccola, moved by laudable envy, applied themselves with more zeal to sculpture than they had done before, and particularly in Milan, whither they assembled for the building of the Duomo many Lombards and Germans, who afterwards scattered throughout Italy by reason of the discords that arose between the Milanese and the Emperor Frederick. And so these craftsmen, beginning to compete among themselves, both in marble and in buildings, found some little of the good. The same came to pass in Florence, after the works of Arnolfo and Niccola had been seen, and the latter, while the little church of the Misericordia was being erected from his design in the Piazza di St. Giovanni, made therein in marble, with his own hand, a Madonna with St. Dominic, and another saint, one on either side of her, which may still be seen on the outer façade of the said church. The Florentines had begun, in the time of Niccola, to throw to the ground many towers made formerly in barbaric manner throughout the whole city, in order that the people might be less hurt by reason of these in the brawls that were often taking place between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, or in order that there might be greater security for the state, and it appeared to them that it would be very difficult to pull down the tower of Guadamorto, which was in the Piazza di St. Giovanni, because the walls had been made so stoutly that they could not be pulled to pieces with pickaxes, and all the more because it was very high. Wherefore Niccola, causing the foot of the tower to be cut away on one side, and supporting it with wooden props of braccio and a half in length, and then setting fire to them, as soon as the props were burnt away, it fell, and was almost entirely shattered, which was held something so ingenious and useful for such affairs, that later it passed into use, insomuch that, when there is need, any building is destroyed in very little time with this most easy method. Niccola was present at the first foundation of the Duomo of Siena, and designed the church of St. Giovanni in the same city. Then, having returned to Florence in the same year that the Guelphs returned, he designed the church of St. Trinita, and the convent of the nuns of Faenza, destroyed in our day in order to make the citadel. Being next summoned to Naples, in order not to desert the work in Tuscany, he sent thither Miglione, his pupil, a sculptor and architect, who afterwards made, in the time of Conradin, the Church of St. Lorenzo in Naples, finished part of the Piscopio, and made there certain tombs, wherein he imitated closely the manner of Niccola, his master. Niccola, meanwhile, being summoned by the people of Volterra, in the year 1254, when they came under the power of the Florentines, in order that their Duomo, which was small, might be enlarged, he brought it to better form, although it was very irregular, and made it more magnificent than it was before. Then, having returned finally to Pisa, he made the pulpit of St. Giovanni in marble, putting therein all diligence in order to leave a memorial of himself to his country, and among other things carving in it the universal judgment. He made therein many figures, if not with perfect design, at least with infinite patience and diligence, as can be seen. And because it appeared to him, as was true, that he had done a work worthy of praise, he carved at the foot of it these verses: Anno milleno bis centum bisque trideno, hoc opus insignia sculpsit Nicola Pisanus. The people of Siena, moved by the fame of this work, which greatly pleased not only the Pisans, but everyone who saw it, gave to Niccola the making of the pulpit of their Duomo, in which there is sung the Gospel, Guglielmo Mariscotti being praetor. In this Niccola made many stories of Jesus Christ, with much credit to himself by reason of the figures that are there wrought, and with great difficulty almost wholly detached from the marble. Niccola likewise made the design of the church and convent of St. Domenico in Arezzo for the lords of Pietramala, who erected it. And at the entreaty of Bishop Ubertini, he restored the Pieve of Cortona, and founded the church of St. Margherita for the friars of St. Francis, on the highest point of that city. Wherefore the fame of Niccola ever growing greater by reason of so great works, he was summoned in the year 1267 by Pope Clement IV to Viterbo, where besides many other works he restored the church and convent of the preaching friars. From Viterbo he went to Naples to King Charles I, who, having routed and slain Conradian on the plain of Tagliacozzo, caused to be made on that spot a very rich church and abbey, burying therein the infinite number of bodies slain on that day, and ordaining afterwards that there should be prayers offered by the monks day and night for their souls. In which building King Charles was so well pleased with the work of Niccola that he honored and rewarded him very greatly. Returning from Naples to Tuscany, Niccola stayed in the Orvieto for the building of St. Maria, and working there in company with some Germans, he made in marble for the façade of that church certain figures in the round, and in particular 2 scenes of the universal judgment, containing paradise and hell. And even as he strove in the paradise to give the greatest beauty that he knew to the souls of the blessed, restored to their bodies, so too in the hell he made the strangest forms of devils that can possibly be seen, most intent on tormenting the souls of the damned. And in this work he surpassed not merely the Germans who were working there, but even his own self, to his own great credit, and for the reason that he made therein a great number of figures and endured much fatigue, it has been nothing but praised to our own times by those who have no more judgment than this much in sculpture. Niccola had, among others, a son called Giovanni, who, because he ever followed his father and applied himself under his teaching to sculpture and to architecture, in a few years became not only equal to his father, but in some ways superior. Wherefore Niccola, being now old, retired to Pisa, and living there quietly left the management of everything to his son. Pope Urban IV having died at the time in Perugia, a summons was sent to Giovanni, who having gone there made a tomb of marble for that pontiff, which together with that of Pope Martin IV was afterwards thrown to the ground when the people of Perugia enlarged their Vescovado, in a manner that there are seen only a few relics of it scattered throughout the church. And the people of Perugia, at the same time, having brought a very great body of water through leaden pipes from the hill of Pacciano, 2 miles distant from the city, by means of the genius and industry of a friar of the Silvestrines, it was given to Giovanni Pisano to make all the ornaments of the fountain, both in bronze and in marble. Wherefore he put his hand thereto, and made 3 tiers of basins, 2 of marble and 1 of bronze. The first is placed above 12 rows of steps, each with 12 sides, the other on some columns that stand on the lower level of the first basin, that is, in the middle. And the third, which is of bronze, rests on 3 figures, and has in the middle certain griffins, also of bronze, that pour water on every side. And because it appeared to Giovanni that he had done very well in this work, he put on it his name. About the year 1560, the arches and the conduits of this fountain, which cost 160,000 ducats of gold, having become in great part spoilt and ruined, Vincenzio Danti, a sculptor of Perugia, without rebuilding the arches, which would have been a thing of the greatest cost, very ingeniously reconducted the water to the fountain in the way that it was before, with no small credit to himself. This work finished, Giovanni, desiring to see again his old and ailing father, departed from Perugia in order to return to Pisa. But, passing through Florence, he was forced to stay, to the end that he might apply himself, together with others, to the work of the mills on the Arno, which were being made at St. Gregorio, near the Piazza di Mozzi. But finally, having had news that his father Niccola was dead, he went to Pisa, where, by reason of his worth, he was received by the whole city with great honour, every man rejoicing that after the loss of Niccola there still remained Giovanni, as heir both of his talents and of his wealth, and the occasion having come of making proof of him, their opinion was in no way disappointed, because there being certain things to do in the small but most ornate church of Santa Maria della Spina, they were given to Giovanni to do, and he, putting his hand thereunto, with the help of some of his boys, brought many ornaments in that oratory to that perfection that is seen today, which work, in so far as we can judge, must have been held miraculous in those times, and all the more that he made in one figure the portrait of Niccola from nature, as best he knew. Seeing this, the Pisans, who long before had had the idea and the wish to make a place of burial for all the inhabitants of the city, both noble and plebeian, either in order not to fill the Duomo with graves, or for some other reason, caused Giovanni to make the edifice of the Campo Santo, which is on the Piazza del Duomo towards the walls. Wherefore he, with good design and with much judgment, made it in that manner, and with those ornaments of marble, and of that size which are to be seen. And because there was no consideration of expense, the roof was made of lead, and outside the principal door there are seen these words carved in marble: A.D. 1278, Tempore Domini Frederici, Archiepiscopi Pisani, et Domini Tarlati Potestatis Operario, Orlando Sardella, Johann Magistro Edificante. This work finished, in the same year, 1283, Giovanni went to Naples, where for King Charles he made the Castel Nuovo of Naples, and in order to have room and to make it stronger, he was forced to pull down many houses and churches, and in particular a convent of friars of St. Francis, which was afterward rebuilt no little larger and more magnificent than it was before, far from the castle and under the title of St. Maria della Nuovo. These buildings being begun and considerably advanced, Giovanni departed from Naples in order to return to Tuscany, but arriving at Siena, without being allowed to go on further, he was caused to make the model of the façade of the Duomo of that city, and afterwards the said façade was made very rich and magnificent from this model. Next, in the year 1286, when the Vescovado of Arezzo was building, with the design of Margariton, architect of Arezzo, Giovanni was brought from Siena to Arezzo by Guglielmino Ubertini, bishop of that city, where he made in marble the panel of the high altar, all filled with carvings of figures of foliage and other ornaments, distributing throughout the whole work certain things in delicate mosaic, and enamels laid on plates of silver, let into the marble with much diligence. In the middle is a Madonna with the Child in her arms, and on one side Saint Gregory the Pope, whose face is the portrait from life of Pope Honorius IV, and on the other side is Saint Donatus, bishop and protector of that city, whose body with those of Saint Antilla and of other saints is laid under that same altar. And because the said altar stands out by itself, round it and on the sides there are small scenes in low relief from the life of Saint Donatus, and the crown of the whole work are certain tabernacles full of marble figures in the round, wrought with much subtlety. On the breast of the said Madonna is a bezel-shaped setting of gold, wherein, so it is said, were jewels of much value, which have been carried away in the wars. So it is thought by soldiers, who have no respect, very often, even for the most holy sacrament, together with some little figures in the round that were on the top of and around the work, on which the Aretines spent altogether, according to what is found in certain records, 30,000 florins of gold. Nor does this seem anything great, seeing that at that time it was something as precious and rare as it could well be. Wherefore Frederick Barbarossa, returning from Rome, where he had been crowned, and passing through Arezzo, many years after it had been made, praised it, nay, admired it infinitely, and in truth with great reason, seeing that besides everything else, the joining of this work, made of innumerable pieces, and cemented and put together so well that the whole work is easily judged by any one who has not much practice in the matters of the art, to be all of one piece. In the same church Giovanni made the chapel of the Ubertini, a most noble family, and lords of castles, as they still are today, and were formerly even more, with many ornaments of marble, which today have been covered over with other ornaments of grey stone, many and fine, which were set up in that place with the design of Giorgio Vasari in the year 1535, for the supporting of an organ of extraordinary excellence and beauty that stands thereon. Giovanni Pisano likewise made the design of the church of St. Maria de' Servi, which today has been destroyed, together with many palaces of the most noble families of the city, for the reason mentioned above. I will not forbear to say that Giovanni made use, in working on the said marble altar, of certain Germans who had apprenticed themselves to him rather for learning than for gain, and under his teaching they made such that, having gone after this work to Rome, they served Boniface VIII in many works of sculpture for St. Pietro, and in architecture when he made Civita Castellana. Besides this, they were sent by the same man to St. Maria in Orvieto, where for its façade they made many figures in marble, which were passing good for those times. But among others who assisted Giovanni in the work of the Vescovado of Arezzo, Agostino and Agnolo, sculptors and architects of Siena, surpassed in time all the others, as will be told in the proper place. But returning to Giovanni, having departed from Orvieto, he came to Florence, in order to see the fabric of St. Maria del Fiore that Arnolfo was making, and likewise to see Giotto, of whom he had heard great things spoken abroad. And no sooner had he arrived in Florence than he was charged by the wardens of the said fabric of St. Maria del Fiore to make the Madonna, which is over the door of the church that leads to the canon's house, between two little angels, which work was then much praised. Next he made the little baptismal front of St. Giovanni, wherein are certain scenes in half relief from the life of that saint. Having then gone to Bologna, he directed the building of the principal chapel of the Church of St. Domenico, wherein he was charged by the Bishop Teodorigo Borgognoni of Lucca, a friar of that order, to make an altar of marble, and in the same place he afterwards made, in the year 1298, the marble panel wherein are the Madonna and 8 other figures, reasonably good. In the year 1300, Nicola de Prato, cardinal legate of the Pope, being in Florence in order to accommodate the dissensions of the Florentines, caused him to make a convent for nuns in Prato, which is called St. Nicola from his name, and to restore in the same territory the convent of St. Domenico, and so too that of Pistoia, in both the one and the other of which there are still seen the arms of the said cardinal. And because the people of Pistoia held in veneration the name of Niccola, father of Giovanni, by reason of that which he had wrought in the city with his talent, they caused Giovanni himself to make a pulpit of marble for the church of St. Andrea, like to the one which he had made in the Duomo of Siena. And this he did in order to compete with one which had been made a little before in the church of St. Giovanni Evangelista by a German, who was therefore much praised. Giovanni then delivered his finished in 4 years, having divided this work into 5 scenes from the life of Jesus Christ, and having made therein besides this a universal judgment, with the greatest diligence that he knew, in order to equal or perchance to surpass the one of Orvieto, then so greatly renowned. And round the said pulpit on the architrave, over some columns that support it, thinking, as was the truth, according to the knowledge of that age, that he had done a great and beautiful work, he carved these verses: Hoc opus sculpsit Joannes, qui res non egit enans, Niccoli natus, meliora vitas, quem genut Pisa, doctum super omnia visa. At the same time Giovanni made the holy water font, in marble, of the church of St. Giovanni Evangelista in the same city, with 3 figures that support it, Temperance, Prudence, and Justice, which work, by reason of its having then been held very beautiful, was placed in the centre of that church as something remarkable. And before he departed from Pistoia, although the work had not up to then been begun, he made the model of the campanile of St. Jacopo, the principal church of that city, on which campanile, which is on the square of the said St. Jacopo, and beside the church, there is this date, A.D. 1301. Afterwards, Pope Benedict IX having died in Perugia, a summons was sent to Giovanni, who, having gone to Perugia, made a tomb of marble for that pontiff in the old church of St. Domenico, belonging to the preaching friars. The Pope, portrayed from nature and robed in his pontifical habits, is lying at full length on the bier, with 2 angels, one on either side, that are holding up a curtain, and above there is a Madonna with 2 saints in relief, one on either side of her, and many other ornaments are carved round that tomb. In like manner, in the new church of the said preaching friars, he made the tomb of Messer Niccolo Guidalotti of Perugia, Bishop of Recanati, who was founder of the Sapienza Nova of Perugia. In this new church, which had been founded before this by others, he executed the central nave, which was founded by him with much better method than the remainder of the church had been. For on one side it leans and threatens to fall down, by reason of having been badly founded. And in truth, he who puts his hand to building and to doing anything of importance should ever take counsel, not from him who knows little, but from the best, in order not to have to repent after the act, with loss and shame, that where he most needed good counsel, he took the bad. Giovanni, having dispatched his business in Perugia, wished to go to Rome, in order to learn from those few ancient things that were to be seen there, even as his father had done. But being hindered by good reasons, this his desire did not take effect, and the rather as he heard that the court had just gone to Avignon. Returning then to Pisa, Nello di Giovanni Falconi, warden, caused him to make the great pulpit of the Duomo, which is on the right hand going towards the high altar, attached to the choir. And having made a beginning with this, and with many figures in the round, 3 braccia high, that were to serve it, little by little he brought them to that form which is seen today, placing the pulpit partly on the said figures, and partly on some columns sustained by lions. And on the side he made some scenes from the life of Christ. It is a pity truly that so great cost, so great diligence, and so great labor should not have been accompanied by good design, and should be wanting in perfection and in excellence of invention, grace, and manner, such as any work of our own times would show, even if made with much less cost and labor. None the less, it must have caused no small marvel to the men of those times, used to seeing only the rudest works. This work was finished in the year 1320, as appears in certain verses that are round the said pulpit, which runs thus: Laudo Deum verum, per quem sunt optima rerum, qui dedit as puras hominem formar figuras, hoc opus his annis Domini sculpsera Johannes arte manus sol condum, natic Nicol cursus ventines tercundum millece plenis. With other 13 verses, which are not written in order not to weary the reader, and because these are enough not only to bear witness that the said pulpit is by the hand of Giovanni, but also that the men of these times were in all things made thus: a Madonna of marble, also that is seen between St. John the Baptist and another saint, over the principal door of the Duomo, is by the hand of Giovanni. And he who is at the feet of the Madonna on his knees is said to be Piero Gambacorti, warden of works. However this may be, on the base whereon stands the image of Our Lady there are carved these words: Sub Petri Cura hac pia fut sculpta figura, Niccoli nato sculptor Johanno vacato. In like manner, over the side door that is opposite the campanile, there is a Madonna of marble by the hand of Giovanni, having on one side a woman kneeling with 2 babies, representing Pisa, and on the other the Emperor Henry. On the base whereon stands the Madonna are these words: Ave gratia plena Dominus tecum, and beside them, Nobilis arte manus sculpsit Johannes Pisanus, sculpsit sub Burgundi tadi beningo. And around the base of Pisa, Virginis ancilla sum Pisa quietas sub illa, and round the base of Henry, Imperat Henricus que Christo virtus amicus. In the old Pieve of the territory of Prato, under the altar of the principal chapel, there had been kept for many years the girdle of Our Lady, which Michele de Prato, returning from the Holy Land, had brought to his country in the year 1141, and consigned to Uberto, provost of that church, who placed it where it had been said, and where it had been ever held in great veneration. And in the year 1312 an attempt was made to steal it by a man of Prato, a fellow of the basest sort, and as it were another Ser Ciappelletto. But having been discovered, he was put to death for sacrilege by the hand of justice. Moved by this, the people of Prato determined to make a strong and suitable resting place, in order to hold the said girdle more securely. Wherefore, having summoned Giovanni, who was now old, they made with his counsel in the greater church the chapel wherein there is now preserved the said girdle of Our Lady, and next, with the same man's design, they made the said church much larger than it was before, and encrusted it without with white and black marbles, and likewise the campanile, as may be seen. Finally, being now very old, Giovanni died in the year 1320, after having made, besides those that have been mentioned, many other works in sculpture and in architecture, and in truth there is much owed to him and to his father Niccola, seeing that, in times void of all goodness and design, they gave in so great darkness no small light to the matters of these arts, wherein they were, for that age, truly excellent. Giovanni was buried in the Campo Santo, with great honor, in the same grave wherein had been laid Niccola, his father. There were as disciples of Giovanni many who flourished after him, but in particular Lino, sculptor and architect of Siena, who made in the Duomo of Pisa the chapel all adorned with marble, wherein is the body of San Raniero, and likewise the baptismal font, that is in the said Duomo, with his name. Nor let anyone marvel that Nicola and Giovanni did so many works, because, not to mention that they lived very long, being the first masters that were in Europe at that time, there was nothing done of any importance in which they did not have a hand, as can be seen in many inscriptions besides those that have been mentioned. And seeing that, while touching on these two sculptors and architects, there has been something said of matters in Pisa, I will not forbear to say that on the top of the steps in front of the new hospital, round the base that supports a lion, and the vase that rests on the porphyry column, are these words: "This is the measure which the Emperor Caesar gave to Pisa, wherewith there was measured the tribute that was paid to him, which has been set up over this column and lion in the time of Giovanni Rosso, warden of the works of St. Maria Maggiore in Pisa, A.D. 1313, in the second indiction in March."